Hi there. In this video we will now solve problem set 9. I recorded a seminar, my last seminar session, which was actually a solution to this problem set, but there was a lot of noise in the background, so here we go. It's a new video now. No noise, it's just my voice. Hopefully it is my explanations will be clear to you. Right, so and also my voice will be clear, hopefully. Right, so question number 1. So it says, explain why an economy's income must equal its expenditure. Now, if you remember from the lecture, an economy's income, an economy's national income, must equal expenditure. Must equal its expenditure, because for every transaction, economic transaction you call it, there is a buyer and a seller. So buyer will have an expenditure, while seller will have an income from that transaction that this buyer and seller executes. So imagine that you're buying a laptop. It's a final product. Laptop is a final product, and it's in the shop. So you go there and pay £400 for this brand new laptop. £400 is your expenditure. Now the seller, the shopkeeper, will receive £400 in return for his laptop, for this brand new laptop, I should say. So that £400 is their income. As you can see, that the transaction of £400 transaction is recorded in GDP as the supply of laptop to the consumers, yeah, for £400. That final transaction, this £400, is contribution towards GDP, right? So as you can see, income is now equal to expenditure in this case. So for this reason, economy's income is always equal to expenditure. Now, B. What does the level of a nation's GDP measure? Now, from the lecture you may remember, the GDP basically is a measure of national income and expenditure, right? And at the same time, it measures level of prosperity, or it basically indicates, GDP is a good indicator of level of prosperity. Although it's not a perfect measure of prosperity, it is probably one of the best measures that we have currently, because measuring GDP is not easy. GDP includes the aggregate value of all goods and services produced, or final goods and services produced and sold to the consumers in a country. So aggregating everything will usually create all these complexities. So, and also some transactions are not recorded. Not everything is recorded, basically. So it's still a measure of prosperity. High GDP means you produce, the country produced a huge amount of goods, let's say, and services. They're prosperous because they have this sort of, from producing and selling these goods, they earned income, high income. So this high income is actually kind of you can think of two families, one a poorer family, one richer one driving an SUV, poorer one is driving nothing. Say they're in public transport, for example. And richer one earns high income, poorer one earns low income. So GDP is like an income for the country. Yes, poor countries will have low income because they produce less. High income countries or richer countries produce more. As a result, they are prosperous. Yeah, it's a measure or indicator of prosperity. So that's answer to B. C now, what does the growth rate of GDP measure? Well, it's simple. It measures the advancement of a country. If you're looking at the growth of income, it's a measure of progress. Yeah, by producing more, we are basically utilizing our resources more efficiently, or some other policy effects are improving our production. But overall, in a nutshell, growth rate of GDP measures the progress of a country. In other words, economic progress. Now D. Would you rather live in a nation with a high level of GDP and a low growth rate, or in a nation with a low level of GDP and a high growth rate? Well, this answer to this question is a bit personal. Obviously, It's a choice again. There's also trade-off here a bit of. Now, to me personally, I would love to live in a high-income country, high-income country or high level of GDP country with a high level of GDP. Basically, is because in high-income countries my wages will be higher. I could buy more goods and services for a pound, let's say, for a unit of income I receive. In low-income countries, however, that may not be possible. I may not enjoy the benefits that I could with the high income that I could get if I lived in high income countries. Sorry. So the level of wages are lower in low income countries. They are less productive, so they get paid less for that reason. And although in high income countries GDP growth is low, it is high basically. Yeah, level of GDP is high, so level of wages are high as a result. Low-income countries are growing, trying to catch up. China has in the past 20 years has had a phenomenal growth rates, 6-8%. USA grows at 2%, maximum 2.5% maybe, but 8% is a dream for them now. Yeah, they've grown up to a mature level now. But that's where they stop. Usually they plateau. Growth of income will kind of stabilize at 2% for them. But for China, it's high. It may go further at even further high rates, but it will eventually catch up and become a high income country and stabilize there as well at a high rate. Anyway, without going further, yes, the answer is that a rational person, I would say, a rational individual would prefer living in a high income country given the high wages, yeah, and variety of goods that are available in high income countries, goods and services for which they have enough income to buy as well. Alright, so now E. A farmer sells wheat to a baker for $2. The baker uses the wheat to make bread, which is sold for $3. Then, what is the total contribution of this transaction to GDP? Now, this here, if I could move this down a bit, for some reason it's just appearing there. I should have hidden it before. Alright, so this transaction here, $2 transaction, is actually not recorded in GDP, or is not contributing to GDP because wheat is an intermediate good. Yeah, it's not the final good yet. However, once the baker makes the bread and sells it for $3, that's the contribution to GDP. That's counted. Yeah, this is the final good. This is the final good. Yeah? And remember, by definition, GDP is the sum of final goods, sum of the value of final goods rather than the intermediate goods. Right, that's the answer. Question number 2. Right, why is it not moving? Oh, I see. Question number 2. Which of the following should be included in when measuring? Oops. Right, okay. When measuring GDP by income method. Right, so we need to draw this now, this circular flow of income. Right, so this is, if you remember, this is our productive sector firms. These are the industry. So firms are populated by, industry is populated by firms that produce and provide services, and this is household sector. What we know from lecture is this: households consume the goods and services produce here in the productive sector, and in return firms firms receive revenue. So this is the revenue for them. Now firms then, to produce the goods and services that is supplying to the households, they hire from the households labor, land, capital stock, so that could be physical capital stock, yeah, labor, capital stock, let's say capital stock here, funding, so on and so forth. So funding could come under the capital part, the financial capital sort of parts of funding, like loans or investment, for example, yeah, by the households to firms. Now, by the income method, how would you then calculate GDP? Now, if we are measuring the GDP by the income method, then we're looking at the payments from the firm sector to the households. What sort of payments do the firm sector pay to the households? So the first is usually, well, let's answer the question because they are all here. These are all here. So these are all here. Right. So wages and salaries. Yes, these are included in GDP because these are income. Yeah, remember this income method means you have to add up the incomes that are earned by individuals in the economy. So wages and salaries are paid to labor. That's it. So that's included. Tax income of the government. No, the government is not providing anything to the firms, for the firms to pay the government an income. So there is no income. Tax is just income is part of the income. Yeah, that has been generated by firms. So that's paid to government for nothing. Yeah, government takes, of course, that and reinvests it back to the industry sector or public sector, but it doesn't actually. Is not counted. That's not an income of government, basically. Yeah, that's been earned because it provided some service. For example, labor owners, people would work for firms and receive income, but government is not working for firm. Yeah, that tax income is not, as a result, part of the income method of GDP calculation, so that's not included. Profits of private firms, these are included because profits, once they're generated, they are bottom line of the business, they are then paid out as dividends for fund providers of funds, for example, shareholders or lenders of loans, for example. Yeah, they are usually households. So households provide the capital to the financial capital to the firms. Firms in return pay dividends out of the profits. Yeah, so that's why it's included. Amount spent on stock and shares. No, that's just transfer of funds. Yeah. However, as we said earlier, profits are then distributed to the providers of shares, providers of financial service, financial funds, financial capital to the firms. Yeah, so the households provide the amounts of funds, financial capital, in the form of, let's say, stock purchases or in the form of a loan. In return, firms pay interest payments and dividends. These are recorded, yeah, not the actual amounts, yeah, not the actual payments into the firms. Yeah, these are just transfer of money from household to firms, but it's the firms paying the dividends back. That's counted, yeah, in return for these provisions, financial service provisions, maybe. Now, moving on, government pension and loans. That these are not also included because these are just merely a transfer of payments from one person to, from government to the persons, people. In return, government is not getting anything, basically. So the people are not working for government, not to receive pensions. Yeah, these are just transfer of funds from without any claims, future claims. Now, rent on land is also included. One second. Rent on land is included as an income because it's just an income on providing the land to the firms. Yeah, this is the sort of a highly stylized case here. The households own the land or factors of production, including the land. They then lease it to the firms. Firms pay the rent, yeah, on the leased land. So that's an income. So we have three types of income here. This income, or this. So A, one more time, A, C, and we have F. So these are basically included in the income method of GDP calculation. Moving on now, what does this say? Right, question number 3. When calculating real GDP, we must use the GDP deflator for that year. Okay, yes, that's true, because nominal GDP and doesn't reflect the actual quantities produced. It actually reflects, on top of the actual quantities produced, the prices or price rises over time, and this may give us a wrong impression that we have high or low GDP. In fact, we may not have that. We may have the opposite. Yeah. We will see that in a minute. Now, this allows us to adjust figures measured in current prices for the rate of inflation and show them in terms of a base year. Yep. Assume that GDP in current prices grows from that much. So let's look at this now. Nominal GDP. Nominal GDP year 1, then year 2. I don't know if this is good enough. It doesn't appear to be a good idea to write here. Right, there's not enough space here. So I'm gonna get my note now. Note. That's probably from last time. Right, so we need to get the figures now here. Right, so in year 1, nominal GDP was 120, 160, and 130. Okay, that's it. Right, let's create the table here again. So nominal GDP. In year 1, in year 2 was 120 billion, 160 billion. GDP deflator, base year 100, and then we have 130. Yeah, yes, that's it. What else is given? By how much has the real GDP grown? Now, nominal GDP, as you can see, let's do this quickly. Nominal GDP grown by a huge amount here, billion. This is in billion. So let's calculate. This is not required, but I'll calculate growth of nominal GDP as well. So the growth of nominal GDP is equal to, using growth rate formulas. So let's do this quickly. Erase this part. Throw this. Right. Its calculation of nominal GDP is this: GDP for year 1, sorry, in this case year 2 now, minus GDP year 1. So this is the current value, this is the previous value, over GDP year 1 times 100. Right, so let's plug in numbers here. 160 minus 120 over 120 times 100, which gives us 40 over 120, 100. There's times here. Now this cancel out here. We will have 1/3 of 100, which is basically 33. 0.33 times 100. Now that's equal to 33% increase in GDP. That's a huge increase, isn't it? That's a good progress. 33% increase from this year to this year. That's a large increase. Now that's nominal GDP. That's in money terms. Oh, right. That's note. That's in money terms. Current money terms. That's a lot of increase. Now let's now do this. We will now deflate nominal GDP by the GDP deflator, so that we can adjust the GDP for inflation in these 2 years. Yeah. Now real GDP here, real GDP for year 1 and now year 2. For year 1, real GDP is basically nominal GDP over 100 times 100. That gives us 120, exactly 120. Keep that. For year 2, that's 160 over 130, I believe. Yeah, so that's this here, 160 over 130 times 100. That gives us, what does it give us? So I need a calculator here. 160 is basically, if I simplify that bit, 16 over 13, and that's 127-ish, 127, no, 123.07. Yes, I kind of remember that. So that's how much these real GDP values are. Now, this is our real GDP. Look, in the base year, real GDP is the same as nominal, so it's the same value. But in the second year, after we adjusted for the price level increases in our effective price level increase in our GDP, what happens is that the actual volume level, or the volume quantities, I should say, that we produce is not that high. It's not 160. It's actually we only produce 3.07 billion more in the second year. Most of that increase here in this nominal GDP was due to the price rises, because prices rose from 100, level of 100, to 130. That's 30% increase in prices. That's a huge inflation. That's in fact hyperinflation. You can think of it as hyperinflation. That's a double-digit increase in inflation. So this rise in our national income was only due to inflation. That means even if our income increased, everything else is increased in price as well, has increased in price as well. So we didn't actually become richer. We only became richer by about 3 billion, not 60 billion, or not 40 billion, sorry. Right, let's calculate now the growth rate, growth of real GDP. That is, again, GDP current years, which is year 2, minus GDP last year, which is the first, GDP 1, and GDP first, times 100. Now, if we plug in the numbers here, that real GDP for last year was that number here, minus 120 over 120 times 100. I need to make sure that I am calculating it correctly without the calculator. So that's gonna give me something like 3.07 over 120 times 100. Now that's gonna be equal to about 2.56-ish %. Wow, that's the growth, real GDP growth. That's quite a low growth rate than this here we calculated for the nominal GDP. This is actually nominal GDP. The increase in nominal GDP basically reflects the increase in price levels as well, while real GDP just reflects the growth of actual production. This is how much we produced between these 2 years, yeah, actually. So that sounds good, 2.56. Right, moving on now. Right, question 4. It's the following table shows the consumer price index CPI for the UK. These are actual CPI values, I believe, where 2005 is the base year. Calculate the rate of inflation for the 8 years between 2000 and 2003 and 2010 and 2013. The formula is given, so this is the growth rate formula, the same as the GDP growth rate formula. It's just now what we did here is we replaced the GDP with price levels, PT and PT minus 1. So PT is the current year, PT minus 1 is 1 year before, so last year, and this is 1 year last year basically. Right, so figures are given. Alright, so these 2 figures are given for us to kickstart. Right, so let's move on now. Let's calculate the inflation rate in this year. So that's 2000, year 2000, yeah. So that would be then inflation equal to prices in 2000 minus prices in 99 over price index, I should say, 99, yeah, 100%. And that gives us 93.1, which is this, minus the previous year's price, which is price level is this much, over 92.3. And here the answer is 0.8 something. I'll just round it up to the next whole number. That's 0.9, so that's 0.9. Next, let's calculate the next one. If I can delete this, no I cannot, so I'll do this here. Inflation for next year. Now this is gonna be price for 2001, so 01 minus price for 2000 over price for 2000 times 100. Now price for 2001 is that. When I say price, I'm referring to price level, which is the CPI index, yeah, and minus previous year 93.1 over 93.1 times 100. This gives us something like 1.1, but round up to the next whole number, so that's 1.2. And in this fashion, you just calculate every remaining others, basically every other, I should say remaining, remaining values. So the same here. So it's the inflation between 2010 and 2009 is calculated using this formula. So the answer here is 3.3. Notice these values are basically rounded up, so they are slightly different from what you would get in your calculator. And 2.5 here, right? So basically we had higher inflation rate in the UK after the 2009 crisis, yeah, in this period, while in the early 2000s inflation rate was low. I think I like it when it's in, when the prices don't go up that fast. Yeah, in this after crisis we had a rampant inflation. That's probably because the economy was doing well after the crisis. It's normal. It's usually the case. Yeah, after the crisis you have faster growth because you're starting from a low base. You produce fast. After some sort of period of recession, you produce more because you start from a low base, right? Anyway, so moving on, could be any other reason, but most likely it's because we were growing faster. It's only now we have sort of growth rate in Britain is just slowing down because of Brexit and all other uncertainties. Business don't know for sure they want to stay here, continue producing or not, because single market access will be lost if Britain leaves the EU. And that's a single market. I mean, the EU has about 350 million people. Billion people. What did I say? Billion? 350 million people. Sorry. Its population is basically 5 times greater than that of Britain. So that's a huge market. And Britain, by exiting from EU, basically losing a market access. So that's why firms in Britain are sort of undecided. They still don't know what to do. Yeah. Alright, so there's a lot of talk about Brexit here. We'll leave it to later. Right, question number 5 now shows, so in fact this must say table shows the elements of national income accounts of a country. The economy is in equilibrium. So the economy is in equilibrium, which means in equilibrium usually we have withdrawals equaling, this is also leakages equaling the injections, yeah. So this is the equilibrium condition, keep that in mind, so we'll use it later. And I also assume that tax revenues are 5 billion, alright. So consumption, household consumption 50 billion, investment by firms 3 billion, government investment 8 billion, inputs from outside 9 billion, and exports are 6 billion. Now calculate the value of national income. So the value of national income, if you remember, NI, which is basically GDP, equal to consumption by households plus government investments, and so this is government investment, this is private sector investment, plus the exports minus imports, yeah. Right, so just plug in the numbers then. So we have consumption, which is 50, plus we have government expenditure, 8. We have private investment, that's 3, plus exports from here, 6, minus imports, yeah, 9. Now the answer here is, if you sum up, you come up to 58. Right, so we will add them up. That must give us yes, 9, so exactly 58. Sorry, I got distracted a bit. So now B. Now what are the levels of injections and withdrawals? Now we know that in equilibrium, as it says here, withdrawals and injections are equal, so we just need to calculate either one of them. Yeah, that gives us then the level of the other one. Right, in this case, what we can do, withdrawals are equal to what were the withdrawals? Do you remember? So if you remember, let's draw this. This is firm sector, and you have household sector. Usually households consume goods, services that firms produce. Firms then pay also to the households income, different income. And we actually, households do not consume everything that we receive as income, so some of the money will go into tax payments, some of it tax, I should say, to government in the form of tax, and we also save some of our income, and some of the money goes out. Some of our money goes out, and say to China, because we're buying imports from them, to anywhere in fact. And this is basically this is basically government collecting the tax, this is banks holding our savings, and this is foreign sector. Now government then invests into economy, this is called G. Banks invest in through the firms, or by lending to firms, indirectly invest into firms, so that's I, and that's investments from there. That G is this G here. And foreign sector, foreigners will also buy from us, so that's exports. Yeah, so this is imports, I should say, not I, M. Yeah, this node is M. Right, so these are, if you sum them, these are, so this is X here. So these are injections into the economy. Yeah, this is injection to the economy, and the sum of these is basically withdrawals, because the money is being withdrawn from households and put into somewhere else, so that's leaving the economy, yeah, for temporarily, right, apart from of course imports. Now, so withdrawals, then let's sum them up. Tax, basically withdrawals are tax plus the total amount of withdrawals, I should say, or level of withdrawals, is tax, savings plus imports. Now if you notice here, we don't have savings, we don't have the value of savings. Yeah, so we need to calculate injections. Then injections are usually denoted as J. These are G plus I, investment, plus exports. So when we export, then we receive money from outside into our economy. Yeah? Now the sum of these is basically, then we have the G, which is 8, plus we have investment 3, plus we have exports, which is 6. The sum of this is basically 17. That stands for, so withdrawals must be 17 as well, which means then we have the taxes, which are 5 billion, imports, which are 9 billion, then savings must be 3 billion. Yeah, savings must be 3 billion, but that's not asked here. Yeah, right, so that's the solution to this problem set. And if anything, any questions, pop by my office during my office hours, or drop an email. We can arrange something for you that suits us, both of us, basically a time that suits both of us. All right, see you in the lecture.